take this opportunity to welcome everyone here for this memorial wake service for Trevor Lyle BEAUMONT, APM, former Detective Inspector of New South Wales Police. There are a number of apologies I've got to get through. Firstly, you may not know some of these gentlemen, nor ladies, but Peter Shelton, Tony and Sheila Brown, former president of the Coffs Harbour RFPA, Hodjo, him and Sue, Bev Clancy, Laura Spencer, and Harley Toms are the apologies that I've received thus far. We gather to remember the little things that made a special place in our heart, to remember those happy times when we laughed, and those times when our hearts broke as one. For who can put a price on memories? We gather to share the pain, to hurt when you hurt without presuming that our pain is the same, to cry when you cry and not try to hide or avoid the tears. We gather to give the gift of grief. The tears are memories in motion. To stand beside you in silence and not be unforgettable with your tears. To allow you the gift of mourning this loss and not lose patience. Grief is nature's way of healing a broken heart. My name is Gary Heskett. I'm the current President and Secretary of the RFPA here in Coffs Harbour, the Retired and Former Police Association. We are here to remember and celebrate the life of former Detective Inspector Trevor Lyle BEAUMONT, APM. It is our hope that every part of this service will honour a life lived amongst us. I'm sure you would like to join me in saying to Trevor's immediate family and relatives that you're in our thoughts because of your loss, and further, we want to be available to you in any way possible as you face the journey of grief. Brett, kids, Ron. Let me express the family's gratitude for your presence. Some of you have travelled long distances right in the middle of a 4-day NRL National Touch League event. That's why I'm working, in fact. The journey of grief is long, and those who walk it should not have to walk it alone. In times like these, nothing takes the place of friends. Your presence helps the family realise how valuable their loved one was to others and shows what an impact his living and dying has made. We honour a man who touched many lives. We will stop to hear the stories, to laugh and to cry together, and once again, and to acknowledge that we are different because Trevor was here. I now wish to introduce Brett Beaumont, Trevor's son, who went above and beyond in his care and his love for his dad. Welcome, Brett.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm the lunatic son. Yeah. Today's going to be a little bit different. Trevor Lyle, TLB Bowie, was a lot different. I thank you all for making the effort to get here today, and it's an opportunity to celebrate with mates and remember a truly unique character. Special thanks firstly to Dawnie, who in the last couple of weeks was amazing. Thank you. My partner in crime, retired Police Inspector Linda Lockwood. Some of you may know her as Mullen or Lewis, has been my rock. And what you see today has been mainly created by her, so thank you. Over the next hour or so and throughout the night, you're going to hear stories, and lots of them. This afternoon when you hear, remember when he did this, stop and listen. There's a high chance you'll burst into laughter, and some stage you'll be definitely shaking your head. The guy was a lunatic, in a nice way. Today is also an opportunity to confirm if that rumour or story is true, because in this room are the people who were there who would have been part of it. And today we excuse the occasional F-bomb, and we all know why that is. So who is here? Family in the true sense, sisters, brothers, grandchildren, the usual. His police family, not just those who worked with, but their families who by default become part of his. Friends, and he had many, he made them wherever he went, and he went lots of places. Enemies, he had a few, and it's possible there may be even a couple of crooks here just making sure he's gone today. If you're a shitbag in here today, my advice is behave. There's a fair bit of old school in here, so answer the questions and do as you're told. Today is not the day to announce or carry on like you're a sovereign citizen. These blokes don't have any patience. They were trained not to have any patience. And if it looks or feels like it's going bad, don't film them. That will simply not turn out well. Bowie. He was the guy you turned to if things were getting a little tough or turning to shit. In saying that, there's a fair chance that he got you there in the first place. But he would get you out of it. Those that ventured to the Robinson River 17-year station can attest to this. The Robinson was his happy place, and religiously in April, as soon as the wet was over, he was on his way, gang in tow. They went from having no idea and catching no fish, to being the best organised, best fisherman on the river. He did probably 30 trips over the years with a lot of different mates. It is a place that tests everything and everyone, and a few never got a second trip. There was no need to embellish stories that happened on the Robinson. The truth is tough enough. He had an amazing memory, rarely forgot a name or a face, and everywhere you would go with him, in no time at all, he knew someone or would know someone who knew someone, and the stories would begin, generally long into the night over a quantity of 4X gold. Would you believe 4X has just released a 500ml can just last week? And he never got to see it. Massive change from the 250ml throwdowns you could not see in his enormous hands. Hands that were recently mentioned on the Australian Police website. Bowie had hands like multi-grips, and I reckon they went around a few throats on occasions. Digging for photos, I found some very interesting quotes. Detective Sergeant Jane M. Gilligan, are you here? Hate to misquote you. Wrote an assessment on him. Trevor's resolute and sometimes assertive nature gained him a great deal of respect. Sometimes assertive? A personal reference by A.J. Madden, Department of Family and Community Services. Are you here? Trevor's oak tree appearance underestimates the very effective communication skills he possesses. Oak tree appearance. He affected many lives, and that's why we are here. The impact that he had on the young victims working in the child mistreatment unit simply cannot be measured. He saved and protected them. He was their oak tree when they needed one. For this work he was recognised. In 1992 he was awarded the highest honour in the New South Wales Police Force, the Australian Police Medal. Whilst giving him the medal, they did ask nicely, can you just stop bashing them? Like him or hate him, he commanded respect and can do so because he earned it. He was generally last to leave, and that will be no different tonight. At least tonight it'll be easy getting him out, and it'll be a lot lighter. He was a great bloke who will be missed. Enjoy the day and the stories. It is how he would have wanted it. Take the opportunity to share those times with blokes and share the fun times. TLB, Trev Bowie played hard, A grade, and left nothing in reserve. Don't rest in peace, keep kicking ass.
Thanks, Bowie. I'll now invite Ron, who's Trevor's long-time cousin. Correct? You want it on? Well done.
Thank you, Gary.
You want to call it out? See if
Can you hear me? I'll try without the mic. If I can't,
Use the mic.
I hate them. Firstly, I'd like to thank Brad for asking me to take part in the celebration of Trevor's life. Jane's sister here, Jane's elder sister, is going to help me talk about Trevor's life as a youngster up until he left Dorrigo and joined the police force. I will talk about the boring stuff and tell you a few funny stories. Jane's going to tell you about the interesting stuff. Maybe she's smarter than me and can make it interesting. For those people who don't know, Trevor and I are cousins. We both ended up here in Coffs Harbour. I got quite often asked were we brothers. And I'd say not quite. We're full cousins. If you don't know what a full cousin is, two brothers married two sisters. They were our mum and dads. Trevor and I were both reared on dairy farms at Deervale, about 20 kilometres west of Dorrigo, and we lived about 3 miles apart. As kids, we spent time at each other's places. Christmas until we were left school, Sunday dinners, sleepovers. Our families were very close, and Trevor and I were born in the same year. It's a little bit hard to write things down about Trevor without involving his family, so if I get off the track here a little bit, not talking about Trevor, I'll be talking about his family. It wasn't easy growing up in the 40s. I remember Trevor's mum and dad built a new home, quite a modern home for the time, and they moved in when Trevor was 2 years old. The builders had a nickname for Trevor. Because of his white hair, they called, the builders called Trevor, they called him Whitewash. His father also had a nickname for him. He called him Calico. The home they built was quite nice. 4 bedrooms, lamb's room, kitchen, bathroom, veranda on 2 sides. Very good home. In the early stages, had no electricity. Had an old wood stove that operated a hot water system, kerosene refrigerator. Things weren't all that easy in the time. Just after the house was built, their father installed a 12-volt electric light plant, which made it easier. We always got into trouble for leaving the lights on because it flattened the batteries. In 1959, 240 volt was connected to the area. However you say, Trevor's family lived fairly well. They grew their own vegetables, had their own fowls, which give them eggs and the odd chicken dinner, had milk and cream, and our families killed their own meat about once a month. Woolworths think they introduced home deliveries. Trevor's mum, they weren't quite right. Trevor's mum would either ring up, send a letter by mail for grocery stores to be delivered on the milk truck. You may notice over there, I haven't had a look myself, a large wood heap. Trevor's mother bought a combustion stove. The combustion stove burned all day and all night, burned a lot of wood. So Trevor's father thought he'd fix the situation. He spent quite a number of days with a drag saw, cutting up blocks. And in the photo, change the photo, mate. Just here, that's the large heap of wood. He employed Bruce, Trevor, cousin Milton here today, and Tom Gurley to split the wood. Trevor and I came the same age, the first 7 years, attended school, sat in the same class. Our first school was Deervale Public School. one teacher school. Trevor and his family would attend the school by horseback. Trevor would ride behind Bruce on a horse called the Grey. Dawn and Jane rode another horse called Pearl. When Bruce went to high school, Trevor was on his own. The school was a one-teacher school. The teacher was headmaster, teacher, looked after the playground, singing teacher, done everything, even cleaned the school. He taught six classes in one room. You wonder how we ever learned it. But Trevor done well at school and finished up with a fairly good education, which is seen by what his achievements are. On leaving school, Trevor went to Dorrigo High School, still rode his horse from home about 3 kilometres to the road, left his horse in a little yard there, travelled about 14 kilometres to high school, where he got his intermediate certificate. From there, he went to Barrow High School to get his higher school certificate. I'm just going to ask Joan now to come up, and she has some stories about Trevor from when he was a baby, and another letter from an aunt. And then I'll come back and tell you about Trevor's life after school.
Well, I'm Joan, the big sister. When Trevor was born, I was 4 years and 4 months old, and Dawn and Bruce were in between. When Mum came home with Trevor, my first comment was, "I told you I wanted a girl." She had a quick, smart answer, but now we have 2 boys and 2 girls. She really did need a nursemaid though, with no mod cons and helping to milk the cows. Later on, she said, if it was possible to kill a kid with kindness, that I would have killed Trev, lugging him around. But I'd forgiven him for not being a girl. One day, when Trevor was about 2, he went missing. There was calling and much panicky looks across towards the water troughs. But he wasn't lost at all. He'd climbed into his cot and was sound asleep with his trusty sucker, a grubby old bunny rug. You couldn't buy dummies then, as it was wartime. Dad would take visitors on hikes. One such trip was to Rob Roy Falls, a decent hike. We would all go. Trev was the littlest, but was a tough little guy and had to keep up. There was no mollycoddling on our hikes. But then, he was probably well stoked with a big plate of Weet-Bix. Yes, he was the best Weet-Bix eater. He'd start with 4, and then he'd keep on adding. Was the record 7, or maybe it got to 9? Dawn tells a story about she and Trevor getting a buster off the horse, Hobo, and had the fork of his pants ripped. Trev went back and changed his duds and went off to school, while Dawn had the day off. Back in 1971, we moved from Bathurst to Sydney. Barry and I both had job starts, but had nowhere to live. For a number of weeks, we moved in with Trevor and Barbara in their house at Guildford. They had Brett and Warren, and we had our 3. It was quite a crowd. It was so much appreciated. We received a letter from our Auntie Violet of the Eddie Beaumonts, and I have her letter here. Just a note to say, you are in my thoughts and prayers at this time. Also, I am sorry to say I'm not able to join you to say goodbye to Trevor. The last time we met up and spent a short time together was at Port Hedland. I was spending the day in Broome and waiting to fly that evening on the freight airline to Port Hedland to stay with Don and Denise. I was in a bookshop and I saw Trevor. Didn't believe it at first. He and Joan called at Don's place and stayed a couple of nights while Ronnie and Pam were also there. Amazing, really. When Eddie and I had 4 small children, I became very ill and my doctor ordered us to take 2 weeks' holidays. It seemed impossible. It was springtime, the cows were calving, and it seemed impossible to get away. Trevor was in his last year of high school and Eddie asked him to come and help do the milking actually. So he did. When we arrived home, Trevor had done a great job. Many cows had calved and Trevor had marked the cow as she calved and the babies were all numbered. Eddie hadn't asked him to go that far, but Trevor was very organised and had gone the second mile. Eddie was amazed at the job he had done. We never forgot that time. It has been such a blessing to us. I'll always remember Trevor, or as Dad called him, Calico. My prayers will be with you at this time and on the 10th. God bless, Auntie Violet.
Thank you, Jane, and you can see she's more polished than I am. Got a couple of stories to tell you now about Trevor in his school days. Joey Freeman is here today, good mate of Trevor's. Joey went to school with Trevor from high school, joined the police force around about the same time. First story I got to tell you, Trevor was staying over at Joey Freeman's place. Earned a couple extra shillings, they went out potato picking. Potato picking's not a very easy job, doesn't make much money neither. In those days it was probably about 2 or 3 bob for 150 pound bag. They come home, knocked up that night, pretty tired, but they'd arranged to go to the pictures with a couple of girls. They sat down in Peanut Alley, probably all that they could afford to see. They Trevor and Shuey both fell asleep during the movie. The movie finished and the girls got up. I don't know whether they were disappointed or wanted to play a joke, so they left without them. The lights went out, the doors went closed. Trevor and Shuey woke up, found themselves locked in the pictures there. Luckily, there's a door on the side that had a bar on it that you could open and that's how they got out. Another story that Shuey told us, when Trevor was at Dorrigo High School, there was Trevor, Shuey and Brian Smith went into the ag shed. They had a rotary hoe in there and it started by crinkhead. But Trevor thought he'd give this thing a whirl. He turned it up, the rotary hoe started, first go was in gear and the rotary hoe took off and went through the double doors. I understand from Shuey that they got 6 of the best for the next week. Another one I've got here was Trevor at Barra High School, got busted for smoking. And his punishment was he had to write home to his parents to tell them that he'd been busted for smoking. Now his parents were anti-smokers and he was shooting bricks to tell you the honest truth that what his parents had said. So he wrote the letter, took it back to the principal, but he wrote a second letter to their neighbour, Jerry Martin, who shared the same mailbox, asked him to the letter so Mum and Dad wouldn't get it. We're not quite sure whether that happened or whether Jerry was too good a neighbour to interfere. After school, Trevor came home to his parents' place. His brother and father on the dairy farm, and there wasn't room for him. He worked around the area for cutting silage for Col Allen, cutting firewood for Reese's Bakery, growing potatoes, truck driving. When Trevor was about 18 years old, the local dairy co-op were looking for somebody to train as an artificial inseminator. To inseminate herds to improve the quality of cattle. Trevor applied for the job and was sent to Berry AI station for training. I know a certificate down there of his training. He had an office at the dairy factory. He would go there at 8 o'clock in the morning, take calls till about 9:30. Then he would zoom around the Dorrigo Plateau, inseminating cows, finish up at Deervale, sometimes after dark. After that, he worked for Bailey's Produce. He was foreman for a short time before he went to the police force. Got a couple of other little stories here I want to share with you. One was camping with Trevor and Bruce. I was on a sleepover with Trevor and Bruce, and we decided we were going to go trapping rabbits. I don't know whether Bruce remembers this story. But anyway, we set up some gear, rabbit traps, and Trevor's father put us in the old Buick, took us out to the property along the road, which was known as Snowden's house. It had been knocked down. The only building that was left there was a laundry. We decided this would be a good place to camp. This building was about 2.5 metres long, window, door, had no line. We set the rabbit traps, prepared a meal that night, went around the rabbit traps, and it started to snow. And our sleeping arrangements was 2 sleeping bags. Trevor and I was to share a sleeping bag. Can you imagine being in a sleeping bag with Trevor? Well, when he was 10 years old, he was a little wiry fella, so we got in that thing, but we were that cold and we could shuffle around all over the place and couldn't get warm. So Bruce says to me, get in with me. Bruce being a big gangly kid, we got in there. We couldn't move around. About 9 o'clock, the car goes past. Bruce says, that'll be Dad taking the cream out to the road. On the way back, Stanley stopped. How you boys going? Do you want to come home? He didn't have to ask twice. We went home, had a cup of cocoa, and was starting to get into bed. Another story I got, and this one's a howler. Trevor was at the Dorrigo show. There was a bar at the show, typical Dorrigo show. It was a wet day. Toilet across from the bar, a big puddle of water, and it was very muddy. Trevor was having a couple of drinks. There was a couple of friends and a young lady who was wearing a nice slim white dress and a nice pair of shoes. And she says, I need to go to the toilet, but I don't want to go through all that mud. So Trevor offered to give her a piggyback. So climbed onto Trevor's back and he sat down across the thing. His feet went out from underneath him. Both went into the puddle. So you can imagine what the white dress and the new shoes was like. When Trevor was working at Bailey's, sometimes they knocked off early. He had a very faithful dog, or he thought he was faithful, and he used to take him to work. He used to run around the street all day, that sort of thing, and night time he took him home. Anyway, when Trevor went to the pub, some days he'd be up early, it'd be 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and the dog wasn't hanging around, so he'd go home. As soon as the dog got home, Barbara knew that Trevor was at the pub. When Trevor got home, she said, you went to the pub at 4 o'clock. You went to the pub at 5 o'clock, and this went on for a couple of months, and Trevor said, how does she know I'm at the pub? Anyway, eventually he worked out that the dog was coming home, because when he went to go home, the dog wasn't there, but the dog was home when he got there. So he worked out he'd shut the dog in the ute instead of when he went from the pub. I was a little bit surprised when Trevor entered the police force. I was in Sydney, I think I was down there having an operation on my nose. Trevor was down there for some reason, and we met up to come home. I don't know whether Trevor drove me home or we come home on the train now. We were crossing an intersection up near Central somewhere, and there was a policeman directing traffic, you know, the whole... And he said, they tell me I should join the police force. He said, they'd drive me up the bloody wall doing that all day. We crossed the street and there was another policeman sitting there on a horse. He says, oh, that might suit me, but I'd need a set of spurs so I could put on a show every now and then. But as I say, I think I was surprised he ever went in there. I'm going to finish by saying, I think you will all agree that Trevor was a bit of a larrikin. He lived life to the fullest. He loved his fishing. He loved a 4X or 2. He's passing the lead, a void in the hearts of the family and his close friends. Now, I do have a couple of apologies from his cousin, Ian and Peter Hoy, Norman Bartlett, Ronald Chittick, one of the local policemen used to work here out of thing, George Williams, and Jim and Colleen Carl. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron and Joan. I often say to my grandkids that it's always the experiences you'll remember. It's not the toys. Got a chap coming up now, Ray Adams. Ray, you're on the throne. Ray was in the job for 39 years. Come up, Ray. No, sitting down. Ray was in the job for 39 years, from 66 to 2002. His area was GD, detectives, onto duty officer, and finally he was ended up as a patrol commander in 95 to 97, superintendent, mainly in the bush. Ray, welcome to the throne. Up here, mate.
Thanks, Chairman Gary, and ladies and gentlemen. Brett's asked me to say a few words in relation to Trevor's working ability, and there was plenty of that. And I'd just like to share a little bit with you briefly. Trevor's done some amazing work over a really long period of time in the police service, and we're going to hear a bit more about that later, so that's where I'd really like to concentrate. But not a lot of people, I think, realise what a great job he really did. So we're going to discuss that, and perhaps not a bit extended. And then just finish off with another one of those Robinson River fishing stories. So they're pretty popular. Trevor's initial years were spent in the Green Valley, Liverpool and Fairfield areas of Sydney. Tough areas which needed tough policing. Those who underestimated a young, fit, robust bloke from the bush, quickly named the Dorrigo Dog, would do so at their own peril. There were no backward steps. He greatly disliked thieves and crooks, was frightened of nothing, and employed a wonderful work ethic which he retained throughout his service. His calling of plainclothes came early, and in 1977 he completed a detectives training course, fast-tracking a return to the bush, which was always his first priority. About 30 of us completed the course together. We all marvelled at his ability to simultaneously study and socialise. Most of us couldn't do it, but he quickly proved he had the constitution of a mountain lion and the ability and the memory to do all the work, thus still allowing a couple of collies at day's end. He even managed to drag some unsuspecting class members away from the books for entertaining duties. But each day he fronted up just a little bit thirsty from the night before. We would hear those words many times during the course and later in his service. But Trevor got all the green ticks, he had the most fun and finished a very tough 12-week course with his designation. Only a smart operator could manage that. You could easily misjudge Trevor, but you only did it once. He transferred to Tamworth and later became the district stock investigator. He loved the job, he knew the area and its people, how the bush worked, and still loathed dishonesty and the crooks. What a wonderful set of skills to take to a new position. He also knew the problems and had an affinity with the locals and related well with them. He was at home on a horse, a motorbike, a tractor. He could check ear tags, count sheep, muster, argue regularly, and was comfortable with all facets of stock investigation. He worked hard for his lockups, was involved in numerous high-profile arrests and trials, and enjoyed the full support of his workmates. He described him as competent and efficient, a great bloke, a larrikin full of laughs, and always thirsty, particularly with those who didn't know him but ended up in his company late at night. Bobby Drew, he sent his apology. Greg Field and Wayne Litton were some of his workmates at that time, and I think we're going to hear from a few stories from Wayne and Nicky very shortly. Trevor was promoted to Detective Sergeant and transferred in charge of the Trial Mistreatment Unit at Alstonville in the Lismore District as part of the Major Crime Squad Newcastle, with a huge patch from Port Macquarie to the Tweed in the north and west to Moree. In a totally new role, people queried how this big, rough and tough former stockie would perform in such a sensitive environment. However, as usual, they didn't want for long because the big fella just threw himself into his new job with great gusto and energy. The unit was a team, including a female police officer to assist with victim care, statements, court appearances, ongoing family support, follow-ups and much, much more. Judy Smith worked with him at Lismore, then Gail Johnson, Jan McCabe and others later worked from Grafton, Coffs Harbour and other centres. These were special ladies. He became close friends with Trevor. Carefully selected, loyal, experienced, who not only had to manage the delicate issues of child sexual assault, but also had to manage Trevor after work finished. Never an easy task. Under Trevor, pedophile lockups quickly commenced, as did a self-generating workload and time spent at court. If we measured the value of a police officer by the number of court cases they had in progress at one time, without doubt he would win the gold medal. If we factored in sensitivity, travel and geographics, double gold. Trevor was a great performer, self-motivated and respected by all. Just a few words from a close mate. If you had a hard nut to crack, call him the cavalry, which of course meant call him Big Trev, and he would quickly sort the mess. Working from cops with others, he led the unit in establishing new reporting systems whereby police now freely interacted and communicated with child sexual assault counsellors, the medical profession, docs and other professionals to enhance and assist child victims of crime. As we all remember, prior to this, referrals were forwarded to police by docs, in which case offenders would be forewarned and therefore forearmed. These new systems inspired confidence in victims, and the mandatory reporting of sexual assault by the medical profession, schools, docs and others became a prerequisite, ultimately resulting in the creation of the Children's Care and Protection Act 1987, an absolute godsend for victims of abuse. This in turn boosted victim confidence, increased numbers of reported crimes and conviction rates of offenders. Trevor and the team were diligent in pursuing these changes, setting a high benchmark, breaking down existing barriers with outside organisations and creating a joint response. This strong approach by Trevor was all about doing the right thing by the kids, which was his personal philosophy and from which he never swayed. For Trevor, it was always about the kids. His foresight and achievements culminated with him being nominated by one of his peers in the same field for an award initiated by the National Association for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, referred to by the police as the NAPCAN Award, usually reserved for academic groups. However, Trevor was the very first police officer recipient. It recognised his commitment, dedication and ability to perform at a high level in a very difficult, sensitive and political area of policing. Following this success, he was also nominated and received the Australian Police Medal in a special ceremony at Parliament House. This award, although very humbly received by Trevor, was to showcase the effort, success and progress of all involved. After the new Act and changes, the reporting of adult survivors of child sexual assault also increased, systematically followed by greater convictions of offenders. It was the team's consensus that the new changes and the way in which victims were now managed, the new Act at last had teeth and could now provide the proper support and care for the vulnerable. This was a huge milestone for Trevor and all involved, and one of which they were and still should be justly proud. However, as in most cases, there's always a cost. Trevor and the team were now in demand of specialist groups. Call-outs became the norm. Supreme Court bail applications were common. The list of ongoing trials in distant locations were difficult to manage, and there were still plenty of crooks to lock up. Working away from home was inevitable, and although he often enjoyed a cold beer or two after work or court, Trevor's personal desire was always to be at home, as difficult as that was to manage. Although we never discussed it, it must have given Trevor great satisfaction and pride to know that he had given his all. He dug the well a little deeper and he helped to build a stronger framework for the future, and this no doubt was something he deeply treasured. One of his greatest compliments, again by one of his own, was that one day he was sitting in court with a child victim, and a sexual assault counsellor and the police were discussing how stressful court cases were for a child. Trevor just got up, took the little victim by the hand and said, "Come on, sweetheart, I'm going to buy you an ice cream." And off they went. And if we multiply those actions, of which there were many over a period of years, it's clear to see what sort of person Trevor really was and what he stood for. He was a giant of a man physically, but he displayed a gentleness and rapport with child victims second to none. So I think he can easily be forgiven being a little thirsty just from time to time. With his tenure complete, he left some wonderful legacies and huge boots to fill. After coughs and trials, mistreatment duties, calmer waters and further promotion beckoned at Armidale. He hadn't worn the blue suit for many years, however. A quieter backwater allowed him to gain the experience needed for commission rank, which he also sought. He attacked the new job with passion, cracked the whip, upset plenty, and eventually secured the rank of inspector at Bega as the boss, at last, before his final transfer to Maxwell to complete a full and accomplished career in excess of 30 years, and one of which he and his family are no doubt very proud. So that's basically Trevor's working life in brief, but as we all know, he was such a colourful character, and stories followed him, and of course they were all true. One that I remember fairly vividly was we had a fishing trip to the Robinson in 1991 with four of us. And we sorted the boats and motors and fuel and swags fairly quickly. And one day Bowie said, "Right, you blokes, you've got one very difficult decision to make." "Yeah, what's that, Bowie?" Said, what sort of beer are you going to drink?" And I said, "Well, we've already sorted that. We're going to drink Twoies, 2.1 light in the white care. He said, right, okay, well, I'm bringing BB, right? So we had a predictable outcome from there. 4 nights to get there, we stopped with mates and friends and in swag and everywhere else. He made something favourite every night, but still woke up a little bit thirsty every morning. At Burwella, we picked up his little average little mate, Willie Shadford, who he nominated as the camp cook. I don't know why, because he used to burn the damper. And but Willie and Trevor had a fair bit in common. They both drank BB. Willie had 2, alcohol. Trevor had about 22, who wanted to kick on and on and on. I think he really forgot to camp on the river, and he just had nowhere else to go. But every day was first day. He was first to stake the fire, billy on, bait sorted, gear packed, ready to go fishing. On return, he'd be first to sort, fillet and store the fish, cook a meal, organise the afternoon session, 2 BBs only, little snooze, and prepare for the afternoon session. At night, Willie would have 2 beers, alcohol. Trevor had another 22 and still woke up a little bit thirsty. 16 days later, still on the river, still doing the same thing. However, we had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and a million stories. And with 2 huge freezers full of fish, thanks to Big Trev. A wonderful trip with a wonderful bloke. Trevor was just so at home in the bush, I found, and he could do anything. He either broke it and fixed it, or he made it, or he converted everything to work. He could fill it, fix motors, he could cook, work the tides, find fish, and a few crocs. But most importantly, he found his happy place. On the river, I found him comfortable, relaxed, and recharged. I always thought the bush was the release he needed before he returned to work. You couldn't ask for a better and more experienced captain, even though we couldn't fill him up at night. In summary, in my view, Trevor was an outstanding police officer, a great mate who had a lot of mates, a gregarious soul with a huge personality and a big, soft, generous heart, full of love, especially for the kids. In all my dealings with him, I found him very honest, very trustworthy, and a close and loyal friend. Sadly missed, but remembered forever. I'd just like to make a very small memento to Fred, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Just a memory.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Outstanding legacy. Outstanding memories. I'd like to take the opportunity now to invite Dave Thomas up to the podium. Dave's police career between 72 and 99, he did 27 odd years. Kicked off in Manly, GDs, Clearway Cyclist, STP North Sydney on bikes, Gunning High Patrol, Tamworth GDs, and then he kicked into plainclothes. He then went to the Sydney DEP, the Department of Detectives Education portfolio as a lecturer, legal services, Chatswood and King's Cross till 1999. Then he went into law firm until about 2001 and retired, believe it or not, as a beekeeper. Thanks, Dave, wherever you are. Come up, mate.
Thanks, Gary. If only any of that was true. I'm sure he's got me confused with Dippy Field or something like that.
All right.
Would that be right, Dip? I'm not going to take up much of your time, and I'm not going to be as affluent a speaker as the old super up there, old Zoom Top. Wonderful guy, and I'm sure he woke up thirsty every morning as well. Trevor Lyle BEAUMONT, TLB, Bowie, Beaumont, you old bastard, the big fella. Some of the names Bowie was named by. He and I walked onto the parade ground in 1970 as classmates, 53 years ago. And remained good mates to the end. You have heard of Bowie's history prior, growing up in Dorrigo and the capers he got up to, and probably only the vetted versions, I suspect. After a stellar career, he retired on the 7th of October 1999, and he went to Arrawarra, his much-loved home by the sea, with Blondie. He often said of Blondie, she's only little, but she's a little beauty. After retirement, I was most fortunate to travel and socialise with Bo. After working with him for many years, when he was at Tamworth, I was stationed at Armidale. Bowie and Joan and Jenny and I would take boat trips up on the Whitsundays. We caravanned around Australia. We then went around, halfway around Australia to that famous rock over there that the government gave away. And we had some aeroplane fishing trips up to Swears Island. Along with that, Bowie continued his annual pilgrimage to the Robinson with roads like Surly, JB, Zoom Top, and many, many others that are probably here today. Bowie continued to do what he loved in his retirement. With very, very varied friends and acquaintances. And if you know Bowie, where you all would because you're all here, he said what he meant and he meant what he said. So if you're no good, you wouldn't be here today. I, over many, many years, 53 of them, managed to avoid going to the Robinson with Bowie, mainly because I couldn't drink enough. Bowie had, over the years, had turned his hand to market gardening with Surly and others to produce watermelons, growing and selling them, sometimes for not much reward. In 2003, Bowie purchased Bow Mist, a property at Dorrigo on which he grew bullocks and spent a lot of the government's money in grants to improve the property. He sold bullocks direct to meatworks and often through his mate Skippy McCarthy. Bow Mist was a very successful enterprise for Beaumont. Through his bullocks adjustment and the final sale, he worked hard and clever and reaped the rewards, as he did whilst he served in the police force. Service, I apologise. When I joined, it was the police force. It later became the police service. In 2015, he considered his options and decided to sell his beautiful home in Arrawarra due to Blondie's failing health. And they moved to Coffs Harbour and purchased at Bedcedar Place. They were very happy there, and it was convenient for Joni with the amount of specialists she saw. And then in 2017 he lost his youngest son, Warwick, which was quite a blow. In 2019 he lost Blondie. and these two events had a big effect on the big fella. He still enjoyed the races, and he was a regular at the Grafton and Coffs Harbour carnivals. He even endeavoured to breed from his old man by joining at a Mr. Innocence. No luck there, a bit of dog food. While still going north to the Robinson, Bowie buddied up with the local identity Max Glenn and started to trip down to Sejuna and Streaky Bay, fishing for the elusive whiting. And I say elusive because I don't think he caught many. He also enjoyed many fishing trips with his mate Alan Turner, his mate from Dorrigo, and they'd go caravanning around the local rivers and streams, attempting to catch a fish. With Bowie's health deteriorating, the colt, Brett Beaumont, stepped up and was tremendous and a great help over the time he had left. You got to know the colt to know what I mean. If there ever was a rogue, he was the son of Trevor Lyle BEAUMONT, called Brett Lyle BEAUMONT. As incapacitated as Bowie was, he was dead set keen to get back to the Robinson and to Sejuna fishing again. So Brett devised a ramp to get the big fella into the van, sober or otherwise. And when perfected, they went to Sejuna, where Max Glenn and his wife mothered him, and Brett helped him in and out of the boat. Robinson was out of the question. So the last couple of years, as you all know, Bowie's health just went downhill. He had a number of problems wrong with him, but he still enjoyed a beer when he could, up until the last little bit. And he was a very strong individual and respected by all and sundry. He remained full of hope and ambition right up until a few weeks before he checked it. Wherever the big fella is today, I know he'd be on TA, he'd be fine for it, because he was the king of TA. And I'll tell some stories later. Thank you.
Apologise, Dave. I'm now frightened to even call out the other crews now. Coming home late at night and bringing the fellas up and trying to get their history and background. I think I might have stuffed the whole lot of it up. Never mind. We come to that moment in the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, for the... This thing needs to be... to do the eulogy. I might ask the chaplain, who was Bruce Beaumont to come up as well. Bruce. Give me a second, ladies and gents. Service History Inspector Trevor Lyle BEAUMONT, APM, register number 14058. He joined the New South Wales Police on the 16th of February 1970. He retired on the 7th of October 1999. His promotional history goes as this. On the 16th of February 1970, became a trainee. That same year in March, he became a probationary constable. On the 26th of March, he became a constable in 1971, a year later. On the 26th of March 75, he attained Detective Constable First Class rank. On the 26th of March 1979, he became a Detective Senior Constable. On the 27th of November 1985, he was promoted to Detective Sergeant, and on the 15th of December 92 to Senior Sergeant, and finally in 10th of October 1995 he made Inspector. I think any young police that are here today know that was the old system of promotion. 5 years, first hook, 9 for second, then you went through the Detective Sergeant or the Sergeant's exams to become a Sergeant, and finally through the Senior Sergeant after you've done about 7 years on the rank of third class sergeant to second class sergeant, and then finally to senior sergeant. His transfer history from the February 1970, he was in the Metropolitan Police Training Centre as a trainee. He then was posted to Metropolitan Number 22 Division, Liverpool, general duties. In 1972, 22 Division, Green Valley, general duties. In 75, he went to the CI branch, number 21 Div, Special Squad. 26th of December 1976, Metropolitan number 9 Division, went to Burwood on CI duty. In 78, 22 Division, Liverpool, CI duty. Again in September 78, number 19 Division, Bankstown, CI duty. April 1980, got transferred to the Voice Tamworth District, where he commenced investigation duties there. In 1985, the Regional Lismore Juvenile Investigation Unit. 87, Coffs Harbour in the Juvenile Investigation Squad. November 1987, he was transferred to the Region North Major Crime Squad investigation. And in 1992, he ended up in Armidale, would have got his senior sergeant as a patrol tactician. 10th of August 95, he ended up at the far south coast in Bega as the commander. In 97, the mid north coast Port Macquarie, where he returned as a duty officer. And then, of course, in 98, mid-north coast Maxwell, again as a duty officer. His awards during his career: on the 22nd of October 1987, he was awarded the National Medal. On the 8th of June 1992, he was awarded the Australian Police Medal for Distinguished Service. And on the 2nd of December 1995, he was awarded the National Medal, First Class, to the National Medal. I might ask you all to stand.
Please say.
As the sun surely sets, dawn will see it arise, for service above self demands its own prize. You fought the good fight, life's race has been run, and peace your reward for eternity begun. And we that are left shall never forget. Rest in peace, friend and colleague, for the sun is now set. We will remember him, hasten the dawn. Before I play the police version of Reveille, I would ask the chaplain to step forward with Bruce.
Well, thank you so much, folks. We've got an opportunity to pray now. It's good for us to be able to pray. And from what I've heard, I'm also an ex-member back in South Africa. I was in the cops, and Trevor certainly sounds like a guy after my own heart for all the shenanigans. But if you bow your heads with me in prayer, you remain standing if you're able to. And then Bruce has got a scripture reading for us and a prayer as well for the family. Let's pray together. Our loving Father in heaven, we want to thank you for a day like today. Even though it's a sad occasion as we say goodbye to a friend, a loved one, a father, a cousin, an uncle, it's also an opportunity to celebrate a life. And so we thank you for the opportunity to share memories and stories, because ultimately it's these things that will linger in our hearts and minds in the years ahead. And as we slowly come to a close this afternoon, Lord, I pray that we would remember that in you we can find strength and peace and guidance. And so I pray for strength for those who are weak, courage for those who are afraid, light where there is darkness, and faith where there is uncertainty. Father, we pray that you'd help us to prepare in this life for the moment of death that we will all face, but more importantly for the victory over death, which is possible because of the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. And it's in his name we pray these things. Amen.
Thank you. I'm the big brother, and I've got a couple of scripture readings, or one scripture reading today that I thought was very fitting for Trevor and what he would think. It is from Ecclesiastes 3, 1 to 8. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what you've planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embrace, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, tear to keep silent, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for being able to come together and celebrate this wonderful life of Trevor. We give you thanks for his life and all the people that he touched throughout his life. But today we pray for those that mourn, particularly his son Brett, Linda, Brett's children, Maddie, Millie and Max, Maddie's children, Eliza and Riley, and Warren's daughter Julia. We pray that their sadness today will be replaced with joy when they remember the great times they spent with Trevor. Please comfort all that are sad on Trevor's death, and we just ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Padre. Just ask you to remain standing just for a second.
You weren't looking good.
Lest we forget, please take a seat, ladies and gentlemen. Time has come to look at the program for a bit of story time, a bit more of a story time now. So we're going to hear from David Thomas again. Dave's been up here, ex-detective. Greg Field, Nippy, mate, ex-cop who turned solicitor. Dawn Stead, the big sister. Don Kill, who also a mate, ex-cop. And Wayne Biffin, mate, ex-police officer. So we would ask David Thomas now to come back up. Thanks, Dave.
We were going to do this at the bar where I can get a drink.
Do you want to do it that way, Brett? What would you like? No, let it go. Let it go. Keep going.
I won't be able to control it.
No control of me now. Just while I'm waiting. Just while I'm waiting. Just while I'm waiting for this thing to work. I must have a little voice. Red, I just have two apologies, one from Ronnie Piddington and one from Peter Neves. Peter Neves was one of his Robinson River fishing mates who couldn't make it today due to work commitments, and Ronnie Piddington, the undertaker from Armidale, he's busy. He's at a wedding in Melbourne. So we're back to Bowie, the big fella, eh? We've had some good times with the big fella over the years, and when you look around this room and you look at Stewie Freeman, JV, the little fella over here from Maxwell, the watermelon grower, you wonder how on earth Bowie made it as far as he made it. But as we all know, he was a great guy, and we had some great experiences with him over the years. And I just thought I don't know how Brett wanted to do this, so I just thought of a couple of little stories that I thought I might pass with you, and do you want me to do them all at once? Yep, wonderful. So, as I referred to earlier, Bowie and I did a bit of caravanning with Joni and my lovely wife Jenny, and everywhere we went, Bowie had problems with Joni in that she wanted the television, the TV, the the telephone, everything working at once. And of course we went out to some remote places where there's no such thing as television or telephone, but Joni insisted she have all of those things. So we get to a place called Burke & Wills Roadhouse, and a lot of you know where it is. It's in the middle of nowhere. However, after being all setting up for a little while, Bowie comes running across the paddock with a great smile on his face. He said, "You wouldn't read about it." He said, "Blondie's happy." We said, "What happened, Bo?" He said, "She's got the 3 T's. We said, "The 3 T's, Beaumont? What's that?" He said, "The television, the telephone, and Trevor." That was the sort of bloke he was. Then we went to the Whitsundays for a cruise. Same crew, Jenny and I and Bowie and Blondie. And we hired a little 42-foot motor launch for the 4 of us that slept 11 for 10 days. So before we got on the boat, Bowie was all concerned. How are we going to work this time? Oh, he said, "How about you and Jenny buy the tucker and I'll look after the grog." Easy, Bo, you do that. So Bo went and bought something like 8 30-pack cans for the 10 days, thinking that would suffice. And when we got on the boat, Trevor took charge of the tender and the anchor and said, "Tomo, you do the rest." Wonderful. So about 3 days from the end of our trip, Bowie comes out all concerned. "I don't think the grog's going to last." I said, "Well, the food certainly will, Bo, and I organise the food, so you've got a problem." So anyhow, the next day we booked in to go to Hamilton Island. So we berthed the big 42-foot motor launch at Hamilton Island, and Bo's off down the jetty, and the first thing he sees is a pub with a big sign out the front, "Tooheys cans, $28. And he bolted, left us all for dead. And he went over and bought 3 more cartons of cans, of which we had to cart around. We had to hire a golf cart to cart around the island because he wasn't letting go. But anyhow, I got the last laugh on him. The last night, had our meals, had our drinks, and Bo decides he's going to have a shower. So off he goes. There's 1 can left. Bo, you could see the look in his eye. He was licking his lips waiting to get back to this can. And so I thought, I'm a bit thirsty, I'll drink that for him. And I don't think till the day he died, the big fella forgave the drink of the can. I don't want to bore you with any much more, but I could go on forever and ever. But I'll just tell you one little story might make you laugh about Bowie's caravan. We're out at a place called Curtin Springs out near Uluru, which used to be called something else, Cares Rock, until they gave it away. And
so much shit.
Oh, Linda, you'll forgive me, won't you? Anyhow, we decided we're going out to have a look at some bloody hole in the ground or whatever it was, and so we all go off except Bowie and Joan stayed at home. I think Joan was not feeling well. So when we get home, here's Trevor with some stranger in the caravan, Blondie perched outside, and half the caravan's outside. We went over and said, "What's happened, Bo?" "Oh," he said, "I can't get the 12 volt to work." "Oh, okay. Who's this bloke?" "Oh, he's an electrician I found around camping over there. He doesn't know much about it either." But he said, "We're having a go." I said, "Good." So we watched there for a little while, and after a while they both threw their hands in the air and said, you know what they said? "We'll just convert it over to 240 for the moment." So they did. So when we get back to the civilisation and Bowie gets home to Coffs Harbour, he goes round to his electrician mate. And he says, "I'm having problems with my van, I've got no 12 volt. It's been like that for weeks." And he said, and on top of that, he said, I can't get the disc to work, the television disc. And of course, that would have made Blondie most unhappy. So the little electrician steps up into the van, turns on the switch and walks in and says, everything seems to be working in here, Beaumont. He said, what did you do there? He said, I turned the 12-volt on. Well, you can imagine what the big fella said. And then after he finished letting off a bit of steam, he said to him, what about this so-and-so disc? He said, show me what you've been doing with it. He said, I've been plugging it in there. He said, well, if you plug it in up here, then it'll work. More experience. Well, he gets straight on the phone. You know what the trouble with that bloody man was? He'd obviously stepped up in a half shot one night. Instead of switching the light on, he switched the 12-volt off. Anyhow, that's just another little thing. I won't go on. I'll give some of these other roosters a go. Dallas, I didn't realise you were here, mate. Young Dale George, he's pretty famous if you haven't heard of him before. I haven't seen Biff. Where's Biff? Oh, Mr. Biffin. All right, who's next, sir?
Rick Field.
Nippy Field, come on up. You're the solicitor come 27-year veteran that I was.
The last time I was with Brett, he happened to mention that I was a solicitor and they pulled the piss out of me for an hour. We could all probably talk for about 4 or 5 hours on our tours with Bowie. I've just got a couple of stories. One, just after he came to Tamworth, pardon me, I just got into plain clothes. And for some reason we were on afternoon shift and we went to a break-in enter, an old lady's house got broken into. And I was writing the particulars down and Bowie asked her, I think we had a drink before we went there too. And Bowie asked her if he could use the toilet. And she said, certainly. And the toilet was about from here to where that table is over there. Bowie's gone in, left every door in the house open, and he's aimed it straight in the bowl. And it sounded like Niagara Falls. Another job we went to, I think Dave Thomas was probably at that one up at Inverell, Dave, Billy Rosenberg, the big drug crop there. And we raided this place, there were probably a dozen or more of us up there. And when we got there, the owner of the property wasn't there, but there was a bloke there who was looking after the place, Billy Rosenberg, and he was a Negro, about 9 stone, and about as tall as me. Anyhow, Alan Donnelly said, right, you and Trevor, you can interview the bloke, so we're taking him around the property looking for everything. We found this it was a shearing shed, but it was all dried marijuana, full of dried marijuana. So Bowie went into the shed with Billy Rosenberg, and I was outside and I heard this noise and I thought there must be sheep in that thing because it was a clattering like they run onto the floorboards. And next thing Billy came out with the handcuffs. I think he must have fell over and he's like that, and Bowie's got the big arm around his shoulder and he said, you know what, Nip, he said, when all this is over, me and Billy's going to be real good mates. I don't think they ever ended up friends. Another brief that he did, I didn't work on this one, and Wayne Biffin can probably add to this. He charged a bloke named Ham with stealing sheep, no goods in custody, I think it was. Anyhow, he was in the witness box, and John Punch was a barrister, and he asked Bowie heaps of questions about this stock thief. Anyhow, as we know, the cops know, you can't get evidence of bad character unless he tries to raise evidence of good character. Anyhow, John Punch, and we all know that you can ask one question too many. Well, John Punch said to Bowie, tell me, detective, he said, has Ham got any reputation up around Niagara? And Bowie said he certainly has. And he said, what is his reputation? He said he's known as a stock thief and a liar. Punch is trying to stop him, and the judge said, you asked the question. So the Ham decides to give evidence. And John Punch was the barrister, as I said. He was asking Ham some questions, and he said, you know, what happened then, what happened then? And Ham said, well, we drafted the lambs off from the ewes, and he said Detective Beaumont was going through looking at earmarks or whatever he was doing, and I said to him, we should let the lambs back in with the ewes or they won't mother up. Some of them will die. But I said, I don't give a fuck if they all die. And about 12 months later, Bowie ran into this John Punch. I think he was an ex-copper too, John Punch. Bowie ran into him down in Sydney, and Punch said to him, you know what? He said, as soon as I asked that question, I knew I shouldn't have said it. And he said, you know what? He said, the bastard didn't pay me. So he got away with that payment. That's all I got to say about him. But there's a million stories, and as I know, Wayne Biffin can certainly add a lot to that.
Come on up, Dawn.
Here we go.
Big sister. Got a tap there, Dawn. Is that good? You're right, mate. You're right. You okay?
You probably worked out by now, Trevor was funny. He was the funniest fellow I've ever known. He's the only person I know that could tell you a joke and he'd laugh like crazy, like as though he'd never heard it before. Anyway, I spent quite a bit of time with him before he passed away, which was wonderful. But anyway, he said to me one day, he was very lucid right till the end, and he said, pass me my teeth, will you? You might be able to hear me better if I've got my teeth in. So I passed him over the teeth, and he picked it up, and he said, you know, there's a funny story about these teeth. And with that, of course, he roars out laughing. I didn't know what the story was going to be. But anyway, I said, well, that'd make a great poem. I think I'll make a poem out of that. So that's what I did. And this is the true story, just as he told me. On Friday nights, the boys all went to the pub to have a few. I often got quite sozzled before the night was through. I'd grab a nice thick fillet steak or a T-bone from the grill, and we'd sit around the open fire to beat the winter chill. I had my swag already out on the tray top of the truck. Because the police were just down the road, I couldn't trust my luck. Now Pete was here. Pete was here to help me when the night was done. He wasn't that much better, mind, but as mates we struggled on. I slumped into the truck like a great big, mighty, monstrous thump. Pete gave me legs a shove and slammed the tailgate shut. Probably doesn't remember it. But anyway, I never heard a thing that morn. I never heard another thing until the shoppers came that morn, as I wrestled in my blankets because my effing teeth were gone. I took off to the showground so I could find a clearing on the ground. But I shook my blankets and my swag, but the teeth I never found. The only thing that I could do was take off homeward bound. And I resigned myself to thinking, that's another £1,000. At least I got a greeting from old Buster at the gate. There's one thing about a dog, they're always your best mate. The warmth was creeping in that day, and it was because it was getting rather late. So I shoved my old farm jumper across the railroad gate. Those teeth that I'd been looking for flew away from me, and they'd landed down around beside the tree. Now Buster thought I'd thrown a bone, so he grabbed them in his mouth, and he fled off quickly down the road, as quickly heading south. I said, come back here, you effing mongrel dog, before I get the shotgun and put you up a whole log. Those threats I made scared him stiff, and he did another 180 up the track. He dropped the teeth and raised his eyes and rolled over on his back. He hadn't made a mark on the teeth that I could see, so I washed them in the cattle trough and thought, I'll do me. And as I put them in my mouth, And as he hadn't made a mark on them that I could see, so I rinsed them. Oh no, I heard that. I never had to worry as I shoved them in my mouth. And those teeth have chewed a lot of steak since Buster took them south. Now every time I put those dentures in my gob, I think of poor old Buster trying to avoid the hollow log. True stories. Also got an apology from our uncle and auntie, our only uncle that's left, Colin Beaumont, and his wife Luz. He had a hip replacement only a few months ago and he wasn't well enough to come. Thank you.
There you go. Well done. Stand by. Stand by.
Thank you.
Yeah, give her another pat.
Also, another apology before I invite the next man up. Don Kuehl, another good mate, an ex-police officer. And I'd like to apologise for Jim and Vicky, is it Hobbs? Rob. And Ronnie Skinner, who also sent their apologies in, who couldn't make it. Donnie Kuehl. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Gary. Trevor Beaumont, Bowie or Bow, is an unforgivable man. In my time in the New South Wales Police and out of it, I can say that Bowie is a very unique person, high standards. First, he's a friend and a man, a member of the police, and then as a police officer, publican, and then a police officer. If the world was full of Trevor Beaumonts, it'd be a pretty good place to live. I first met Trevor in the late 1970s in Sydney, and we caught up with one another again in the early 80s when Trevor was an stock squad investigator at Tamworth and I was stationed at Gunnedah. In the years that followed, Bo and I worked in the same areas for a long time. So since the 1980s, until Trevor's recent passing, we've been mates in and out of the police force. His partner Blondie was also a great friend, and I met his son Brett at his young school in Tamworth, so it goes back a fair while. Some of the stuff I've got here has been mentioned a number of times before, so I'm not going to repeat that stuff. Brett, mate, you can carry your head high. I'm full of admiration for you, mate. The way that you looked after Dad in recent times, relocating basically yourself to do so. You have my admiration, mate. Keep up the good work, and I'm calling you Bowie now. When I was at Gunnedah and Trevor was at Tamworth, he sort of basically worked in the Tamworth Detective Office, of course, but he was a stock investigator, so most of his work he did alone, or sometimes he took a mate with him. And I found that Trevor's knowledge in the stock investigation field was, basically second to none. I don't think I've ever come across or heard of anyone that was as good a stock investigator as Tamworth. Obviously, that goes back to his younger days when he was born and reared up the Doggo area, and he knew it all about stock, and all, that includes all stock. I remember one notable case he had. I wasn't involved with him, but he spoke about it a number of times with me, and it involved a crook out at Weewar by the name of Terry Hall.
Terry Hall was a very revered fellow in that area. Unbelievable stockman, camp grafter, allegedly a pillar of society. Wasn't much to do with stock that Terry Hall wouldn't be able to do it. And obviously he thought he was bulletproof too. But he was a cattle thief, and a very, very good one. And when Trevor started to do the investigation about all the missing stock from this beautiful big place that he called Bull Carroll, and it became a little bit of knowledge that Terry Hall was the suspect, people just threw their arms up in the air and said, no way in the world. Well, they proved them wrong, locked him up and convicted him, got him sent to jail. That was a great achievement. So as time went on, Bowie became the detective sergeant. He couldn't stay at Tamworth, as been stated, and he got the job up in Lismore as in the childless prison. You know, I think Jude Smith is here today. I think Jude was his first workmate, and they worked out a little Austin little police station. And as Ray Adams said earlier, there's a huge area, Trevor, in that area. So Trev's gone from being a stock investigator, knocking around the bush, knocking around with some rough and tumble blokes, to now he's the boss of the child mistreatment unit, looking after kids of tender years and locking up the people responsible for sexual assaults upon them. So all Trevor's abilities went over that area, and Trevor locked a lot of blokes up for those offences. It's all right to lock a fellow up, but those that have sort of been in the job know that once that happens, of course, the work starts. You've got to get your brief ready. You get your brief ready, and then you go to court. You spend weeks and weeks at court, organise the witnesses, look after the witnesses. And Trevor was always in, because not many people plead guilty to these offences, so while Trevor's out locking them up one time, the next week he's got a 4 week in court. So, and while he got the 4 week in court, of course the job's been coming in, but Trevor, Jude, you'll be able to relate to all these times. But Trevor kept shouldering on and did a marvellous job, and as been said earlier, he won the police medal for his dedication to work in that area, and it's a huge honour, that police medal, unbelievable. Brett's got it on today. Good on you, mate. And he's also got his police national medal on. Good to see you again. On the lighter side of things, I'll tell a couple of stories like I've been told already, but when he was a stock investigator at Tamworth, there's a piggery nearby, and the fellow managing the piggery was knocking the pigs off. Bowie got the complaint, and the fellow's surname was Norman. I just figured his Christian names a long time ago. So by this stage, Norman had gone down to the Boswell area, and he was managing piggery down there. So Bowie got all the stuff ready and rang me up, and he said, the boss said, I can take you with me to go down and get this fellow. And I said, yeah, okay, good. So we first went to Sydney to speak to his now new employer, who owned a small goods company in Sydney. When Trevor went there, he owned him, said, got to go down there tomorrow and talk to your manager, and if everything works out, I think he's going to be going in the bin sort of thing. So you might have to get someone there next week to look after the place. So that was a Friday night. So we stayed in Sydney on a Friday night, and it was a big rain. We got up early the next morning. I think it was Saturday, and it was a Saturday from memory, because anyway, we were listening to races on the Saturday before we got there. So we drove down to Mosvale, went out to Piggery, no sign of anyone. So it was nearly lunchtime by this time, so we parked the car under a shady tree, went over to the yard, and both went to sleep. The crook come and woke us up. I'll never forget. So the crook woke us up, and we dusted ourselves off, and had a quick talk, took him into the Moswell police station. And Nick Bryant was there at that time. Nick later moved up this way. Good fellow, Nick. What are you doing, boys? Oh, we've got this fellow to interview, see, and I'd been after lunch by now. And Nick said, I'll be out at the pub over the corner over the road here. I think it was the Central Hotel at Moswell, I just forget. You blokes are staying there? Yeah, we're staying there. Yeah, right, okay, mate. So we sit down and away we go. And we're doing a record of interview. And for those who don't know what a record of interview is that you load up the typewriter and I was the typist. And I always asked the questions about the theft of these pigs. See? And this fellow Norman, every time Bowie would ask a question, he'd go on and on and on with his answer. Now, as the cops or ex-cops know, well, that's pretty good because when someone just wants to keep talking, it gives you more ammunition to load up the next question and gives you more understanding of what's going on in the background. So this is all right, so it's going on and on. And Bo starts to look at the clock. Geez, time's in mine. So Bo said to this bloke, mate, really, will you try and say yes or no to the questions that I'm asking you? So that's okay, so away we went, kept going. And then we get a stage of the interview, Bo, you answer this question, and the bloke said, yes, in no. And then he went on. Bo, you didn't crank your head. So finally, by this stage it's pretty late at night. So we put him in the bin, and as Bowie used to call it, we put him in the bin and charged him. And we raced out of the police station straight across the Central Hotel to Mick. And so the world was a good place all again. Great experience. Another crook I locked up in True was a bloke called John David Horn. He's a false pretenser from Queensland. And John David Horn used to go around visiting premises, business premises, and he'd befriend the people that owned it, and sort of, during the course of conversation, he used to ask, is it for sale? Oh, yeah, it's for sale. Yeah, it's the right price. I'm long tied up with the real estate company in the Gold Coast, and I do a lot of advertising for them as well, the company. And I just go and grab you one of my books and show you. So you go out in the car and he kept reading this big, beautiful coloured brochure book. And he said, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the Gold Coast that like to buy this little place out here in the bush. Anyway, cut a long story short, you get a cheque for $700 or $800, while you go to the next town and do the same thing. But what he did when he got back, all the people he'd called on, a lot of them, he'd get enough magazines to print up to send them one each, and he'd keep a few spares for himself, so next time he went out on the road he could hand these magazines around. So this particular lady had a copy of the magazine, and Trevor and I went through the magazine and we picked out a lot of people and rang them up, and yeah, he got them too, and they was, they'll join the queue. So you go and get statements off them. So we travelled all around the country by getting these statements off these people. There's a fair few, so we got a fair few miles out of that job, but the time came to go up to the Gold Coast and lock John David Horn up. So Trevor and I set sail up the Gold Coast to lock him up. And Horn was a pretty smart operator. In those days, all the police cars, I don't know if they are now, but all the police cars' registrations expired on the third month every year, so half the time if you're in a police car and someone was a bit of doubt if it's a plain police car, they'd look at the rego, and if the old rego on the side of the car, third month, well, that's a pot car. So we pulled up before we got to the Gold Coast, and Trevor had a set of Victorian plates in the boot. So we took the New South Wales plates off, put the Victorian ones on. I didn't ask him where he got it from. So we started looking for John David Horn. We had a fair few arrested. We weren't having a lot of luck. There's no means of tom-toms in those days, or Google Maps. So Trevor had the old man at Gregory's directory. So we're driving around one night trying to find a place. And I was driving along, and next thing I know, the Gregory's gone straight out the window. I've got no idea how I went out there, honestly. So I had to gauge Trev says, don't worry, mate, we'll find him. Anyway, yeah, we did find him. We locked him up and we got him extradited back to New South Wales, and eventually he went to court. But because there were so many people involved as victims, we had the court case at right in the middle of town there in Hunter, just off Hunter Street. We were there for weeks with a lot of organisational witness and whatnot. But we had a great time, and once again we got the result we wanted. Yeah, so once again the good guys won it, everything was all right. I'll just finish up by saying this. Bowie is a very unique human, a great mate, a great workmate, a fellow who attracted friendships in all sorts of areas. And someone's already spoke about Al Willie Shadford up at 17 years. Bowie used to talk a lot about Al Willie and the good times he had with him. And I'm sure if Al Willie was still alive, he's gone, but I'm sure he'd say that Trevor Beaumont was a great mate of his too. Bo, we'll all miss you, my friend. Love you like a brother. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. Well done. Thanks, Bev. Wayne Bev can come up, our final person to tell a yarn, the story. We all going all right out there? We're not dying of thirst yet or hunger? All good? Come up, Bev.
Thanks, Gary. Well, I'll be probably a bit shorter and sweeter than some of the others. They've stolen my thunder a bit, those blokes. There's a few things there that I probably might have mentioned. But I just go through. I met Bowie first time back in 1972 when he was at the lovely Green Valley. We called it Green Valley. There was no valley. It wasn't green. It was the roughest, toughest part of Sydney in those days. And there's nothing to compare with it today either. It was a real new suburb, brand new suburb, full of blue-collar workers, a lot of hard, tough men. And the only police that were sent there were hard and tough themselves. And Bowie, of course, was one of them, one of the best. I was probationary constable at Liverpool at the time. And the likes of Bowie and some of the others that walked in from the Green Valley, we'd all stepped to the fire. You'd almost salute them as they came in. They were held in that high regard in those days. Bowie came to Tamworth in 1980, as has already been said. I was there at Tamworth at that stage as a young detective, just not even quite designated as a detective at that stage. I learned a lot from Bowie, worked a lot with him on the stock work. I'm not from a stock background myself, and in fact took over from him after he left the stock. But he did a lot of fantastic work there, and a couple of those have been mentioned. Nippy said that every brief Bowie had was a famous brief, and it was like the famous ham brief that he spoke about. He said I had something to add to it. Well, not really. The bit I found funniest about that brief was a fairly minor charge, but Bowie took 30 odd ewes as exhibits. They were all lambs at foot. By the way, they didn't all effing die. They were all kept. They all survived, and then Bowie was a headache for the next 3 years. He was a headache for the exhibit officers, because here he is with all these ewes that had lambs. They grew up. He thought he better put a ram in with them. By the time it was all over and done with, there was 300 sheep went back to Greg Upton down there. Greg Upton's a local down there, a great fella, still around, and still remembered Bowie. I mentioned Bowie to him only a few months ago, and he remembered him well. And Bowie was held in that high regard. in everything he did. And that the one that Curly spoke about, the business bulletins of Australia, that was a great one. They toured Australia for years on that. BEAUMONT TA, which for those that don't know, TA is travelling allowance, which is, I think in those days was about $200 a day, which it came in pretty handy when you worked over here. Bowie was certainly a class act. He's one of the greatest fellas that I've come across. Probably the best detective I've ever come across. And as has been said, your boy's appearance, you might not take him to be as sharp and the sort of bloke that he is, but he was as sharp as a tack and a really, really good operator. I won't go on, but some of you might know he had a favourite word. It started with F and ended in UCK. He used to use it a lot. And our old boss at Tamworth in those early 80s just thought one day he'd try and count how many times he used that word from when he picked him up at his home to when he got to work. He got about halfway and got past 100 and lost count. Despite that, he's one of the greatest people I ever worked with, and I'm glad that we've had this tribute here today, and thanks for the opportunity to say a few words.
Is there anybody else who would like to say a few words? But no, the bar's open. And further beyond, I'd like to thank all the speakers and the stories and the family as we came here today for this memorial service to remember Trevor, Bowie, and what a great man, and I'm so pleased to see all you people come here to remember him. Thank you very, very much on behalf of Brenton, on behalf of Trevor's immediate family, sister, grandson, granddaughters, and I would really be much appreciated by the Beaumont family. Thank you very much. Let's go and enjoy a beer.
Let's have a bit of slim.